Hey everyone, welcome to League Weekly. This show, we're going to be talking about the playoffs, which just happened, North America, EU, elsewhere, etc., more. And then we got MSI starting, so there's so much to talk about. League Weekly starts now. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of League Weekly. As always, I am joined by my intrepid co-hosts. Yes, they are very intrepid. Maybe no one is more intrepid than Mark Zimmerman. How's it going, Mark Zimmerman?
Pretty good. I was in Vancouver for the event, doing some interviews and stuff like that. And it was pretty fun, but it was the first time I had gone to an event as like outside Riot or a team. And so I hung out with a lot of the media guys more, and the media people are pretty lame, actually. I think it was like the least fun I had in an event.
Wow.
Just because
I agree. Emily is pretty lame.
Flame is lame.
She wasn't even there. I can't imagine what it would have been like if she was there, dragging everyone down.
And I am a really boring person, but you know.
No, it was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time with Travis, unfortunately, but it was okay.
And Peter.
Unlucky.
Could have done with more Peter.
Yeah. Well, he had the analyst test the next day. So, well, I'm glad you had a good time, even if you're going to be rude and disrespectful to everyone that's in my part of the industry. Next up, we got Emily Rand.
Hello.
Emily, unfortunately, was not in Vancouver. What did you do this weekend, Emily?
I watched a lot of League of Legends.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
That is my life.
Yeah.
It was actually fun.
Yeah.
I watched the Korea finals. They were a sweep.
Yeah. Emily, what do you think of our new desk?
I actually like it.
It's a nice,
I think it's cool.
Fine wood, you know?
It smells nice, actually.
Almost kind of like a restored hardware thing.
Yeah.
So let's keep talking about the desk. Maybe that's what the new
Maybe
show
not.
Okay. We'll move on to all the way from China. We have Kelsey. How's it going, Kelsey?
Not bad. I'm feeling a little bit ill this week, but you know, people already hate my voice, so it'll be pretty awesome.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it'll be good. Also, this week, since you asked and you care a lot, I went to the LPL and was there for the entire span of the time in which OMG and IMA had that very exciting pause. You can find exclusive English translations of the LPL press conferences on Yahoo Esports, and that's about it.
Yeah, very good. And everyone is looking for exclusive English translations of the LPL press conference. So I'm sure it's very good. You look a little different this week. Did you adjust your ring light?
Yeah, I actually am using my ring light. However, if you are one of the 3 people who watch my show with Emily, then you already knew that.
Okay.
So it's good.
Very good. Well, it's exciting. It's an exciting day for us here at League Weekly. We've got a new desk. The ring light is different. Mark Zimmerman dressed up today by wearing just a very lazy sweater. Life couldn't get better.
I got back from Vancouver last night at like 11. I didn't let me do all my laundry for my good clothes. I didn't have a chance.
You only had to work 2 days. That's how much good clothes.
Yeah, but I also didn't do my laundry before I left for Vancouver, so.
Okay. Well, all right. Anyway, for those of you that have not watched League Weekly before, this is a show that streams every week on Twitch and on Yahoo Esports. You can find it 2 p.m. Pacific. Normally on Mondays. This week we're on Tuesday because we're adjusting, and actually next week we're going to be on Tuesday as well because the play-in is starting, which we'll talk about shortly. We also release a podcast version as well. That's on SoundCloud, though we're figuring out a way to get it over to iTunes, and it shows up on YouTube, over at the Yahoo Sports YouTube, etc. So be sure to check all that out, and of course you can always find a ton of that stuff up on Yahoo Esports itself. But without further ado, let's get into all the exciting topics for this week. The first thing, obviously, is the NALCS playoffs that happened in Vancouver, as we were discussing. Some of us were there. And Mark, you want to start us off with your question?
Yeah, sure. Why not? So in case you guys missed it, the question is, after what happened, are you more or less confident for the NA's hopes and dreams at MSI? Because during the finals, it started off with TSM kind of dominating C9. C9 came out very flat. They didn't look like they had a lot of energy. They were just getting rolled over by TSM in the first 2 games. During game 3, things start turning around. C9, it's a pretty scrappy game, but they win that one. They win game 4 as well. It goes to 5 games, and the 5th game is like this crazy bloodbath, nonstop fighting. And then eventually TSM clutches it out at the very end with a Elder Dragon call. So after seeing all of that, I take the opinion that it both raises my expectations a little bit, but also lowers them a fair amount as well, because the biggest concern I have, obviously besides the fact that NA is not playing at a super high level, which I think we all knew heading into this. So the final didn't change my opinion of the level that NA is playing at. But it was like a little scary that TSM still doesn't seem to have like a killer instinct in any way, where it's like you could just 3-0 them if you just kept playing well. I mean, C9, yeah, they stepped up and like started playing better between 2 of the games, but TSM all season long went to best of 3s and like needed 3 games to beat Envy and Team Liquid and like all those kind of guys. They struggled. They even lost to Team Liquid. And then the finals here, it's like, all right, you're up 2-0. The other team's looking kind of flat. What happens? It goes to a crazy-ass Game 5, and that's what it takes to win. So that part was a little scary. I did like how they didn't, like, at the end of the game, the final call, I actually like that one. It's a very high-pressure situation to, like, cut the wave and then go to the Elder Dragon. So I thought...
Really, Bjergsen said in the press conference he didn't think it was a high-pressure situation.
So we were sitting with Doublelift during this point, and Doublelift was like, that call was bad. I hate that call. So that's what Doublelift said. I said I liked the call, but it was risky. And then Bjerg's like, I thought it was a great call.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't think it was risky.
Yeah, so I was like,
you both agreed it was risky, but Peter thought it was risky for all the wrong reasons. You thought it was risky for all the right reasons, and Bjerg was like, it wasn't even risky in the first place. So, we're all good.
Yeah. It was differing opinions on it, but I still like that they were like not just sitting in their base and like, all right, the other team has Baron now. I'm going to sit here. So it shows that like, you know, they're not going to like fold under pressure, but they also don't seem like they step up and know how to like finish people quickly, which is scary for me in MSI when they're going to be playing, you know, best of 5s versus teams that they probably aren't super respecting, where it's like, oh man, I'm playing up against Faker. I'm amped up for this one, you know?
Yeah. And really quickly, Twitch chat pointing out that the volume's a little quiet. I know we're working on it, so hopefully and please let us know if it seems to get fixed. But yes, moving on. So the question is, did these crazy games raise or lower expectations for North America at MSI?
Yep. And I was saying some good, some not so good.
Yeah. Overall, though, for you, Mark?
I would say overall probably a little lower.
Okay.
If TSM 3-0'd, it would have been great. It wouldn't have been that great because it's still like, okay, the NA region's not as competitive as we hoped, but it kind of ended up being competitive for not great reasons.
Yeah, I thought the games were, until the 5th game, they were very one-sided. Game 4 had a really wonky draft with the all shields plus Lucian comp, which was kind of interesting out of TSM for many reasons. But I think for me, I was a little bit concerned about North America coming into this event anyway. I know we're going to talk about the play-in later, but it will be... like, this is already a very long event, and having to play in that first round of the play-in is going to be exhausting. And I'm not saying that I think TSM are going to drop a game to whoever makes that, or not a game, but I'm not saying that TSM are going to drop a series to whoever makes out of the play-in. But I do think that you have to account for the fact that that's extra preparation. It's extra work they have to do. They have to be there like sooner after their own finals, and they will have to play these games before presumably moving on to the final event. And heaven forbid they do drop a series, they would have to play in the losers game, so that would be another best of 5. All that means that they will be more tired as a general rule going into the main event, which is something that I would actually be a little bit concerned about, just because there are already some questions around the length of the event, how exhausting it is, and now that TSM have to go through the play-in, I'm concerned from this series because I think I really wanted TSM to come out and sweep and have this like dominating performance where they're like, yes, we are the best. We've got this. We've improved significantly. Like we're gonna come out and we're gonna be really, really strong.
That's the problem, though. Was like,
and like it just, and after the second game, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like they got this. Like we're gonna be good. And then it was just, and the level of gameplay was slightly lower than what I expected out of TSM. Like I thought the games themselves were very one-sided for the most part. Game 5 exempted. So that's another thing that concerns me as well. Like I'm wondering what's going to happen if TSM gets behind, like doesn't get an early lead and then has to go through a best of 5 against a team that does know how to punish that, which I don't think would happen in the play-in, but I'm talking about once they get to the regular MSI event, I think there are a lot of teams that will be able to punish them, and they'll already be a little bit tired from that.
Yeah, I think Oh, sorry, you go, Kelsey.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to point out that I don't really think my perception of whether NA is better or worse changed that much based on the final. I think that for TSM, I think you could go back in time, right, to 2014, 2013, and see what some of the people were saying a little bit about maybe even LPL teams. Like, okay, they'll surprise people with their willingness to 5v5 some people, but the sideline control in those games has been consistently, like, poor in NA, things like this. So just their ability to keep track of everything that's going on across the map, I think actually Cloud9 might be a little bit better than that, and that's better than them at that, which is part of the reason why they had trouble. So I think that that's a concern, definitely at MSI, just those types of factors. Also, even the games that TSM were just really, really convincingly winning, there were a lot of mistakes made by Cloud9 players. Like the blind invades from contracts and things like this were just really questionable. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think we'll definitely see a lot of teams making really bad mistakes at MSI. I'm not saying that that's not going to happen, but it is a little concerning for NA fans. So.
Yeah, I think what Emily was saying, like, oh, we were hoping to see them improve and come out and crush C9. Like, sure, they were crushing C9 those first two games, but it was basically C9 being like, please stomp on my head. I'm going to run and, like, die under your turret, and then I'm going to respawn. I'm going to run top, and I'm going to fight. Like, they basically look like CLG when CLG is playing bad, where, like, CLG is getting aced pre-20 minutes every single game. That's, like, what was happening in the first two games, not like, oh my God, they're outlaning them, and then they make a big TP 5-man play bottom. It's like, oh, Jensen killed himself 3 times, and Contracts killed himself.
That second game was like watching solo queue.
Yeah, it was awful. So that's why it's like, yeah, TSM looked great, quote unquote, for 2 games, but not really.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my take too, is like, at the end of game 2, I didn't feel like TSM was looking great. It just looked like C9 was looking bad. Like, everyone around me was kind of like, this just, C9's playing like they're just a middle of the pack LCS team, and it's like, that was, I think, why I got more excited later on, is because it felt like, okay, C9's actually putting up a fight, and it felt less like it was TSM flopping. But you disagree with that, Emily?
For game 4, I think you have to call the draft into consideration specifically. That's what I mentioned.
By the way,
just because it was this draft that C9 were able to punish them early, and with the Lucian as their only damage carry at that point, and like an all shield like tank comp, it just wasn't like, it was very easy for Cloud9 to kind of close
dink it off the ground.
Woot12345, which is a great name, by the way, in Twitch chat, says, why do these guys assume TSM will make it to the main event? Lol.
Because I know the play-in teams now.
I mean, it is within the context of this conversation.
Yeah,
Finals Razor lower NA's MSI.
We're gonna talk about. Or I guess I'm gonna talk about the play-in later. I think.
Well, you said best of 5, Emily, so that goes even further. So
yeah, I think the reason why it is because the play-in stages are the best of 5, and no minor region has ever won a best of 5 against a major region team at an international event. I think it's very difficult to do so because typically when you have a team that is the top of a minor region, they are very good within the context of their region. There are a few exceptions. And again, like, we're going to get into this a little bit later because this is a topic we're going to bring up later on in the show anyway. But the main thing is that I do think TSM over a best of 5 against a minor region team, with like a few exceptions that I'll bring up where that team would be playing at their best and TSM would be making like all of their worst mistakes at once. I think it's there's a very specific window that minor region team would have to hit in order to beat TSM in a best of 5. So that's basically why, although I can elaborate on why I continue to think that later on.
We'll catch that in the play-in stage. Just wanted to kind of address it as we were talking so much about TSM going there. The other question I wanted to bring up with you guys while we're on the topic of NA finals is actually throughout the whole weekend, and I'd love to get your guys' takes on some of the other games that were happening internationally. Doublelift, who was with me, had said throughout the whole weekend, he's like, I just feel like this meta is so snowbally, and it did seem to be the case that on day 1 and on day 2, whoever got the early lead just ended up winning the game. Game 5 a little bit different, a little weird, but it did just seem like over and over again across all these games that was happening.
I think it's a symptom of just having 4 standard lanes for the most part. Like you don't have as much space to like hang on when you have all your outer turrets up, because you like that's where the minion wave stops. If you're gonna farm, you have to be there, and like you don't have as much room to like build a wave, push it, catch it, move. Like those are things that when you had the obviously the lane swap meta, one, you could dodge bad lanes, so you didn't just get smashed like what happens when it's like, oh, they pick Caitlyn and we have Lucian. Well, we're just gonna get destroyed for 10 minutes and then hope we're like not so far behind that our shield to Lucian comp works, because that's like a clear game where you take that Nautilus, you 2v2 or you lane swap like in old metas. That's like what happens, and you just can't do that anymore. So any draft mistakes laning wise get exploited way harder, and it's just a lot worse to play that way. That's why you heard like a lot of teams saying they thought that the early game was a lot more important this time around, which was why like there was that whole debate with Weldon.
So for G2.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So yeah, maybe Kelsey has some thoughts on that.
I'm sure we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting topic.
You know what team isn't like that as well? SKT.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, that's like that's always been them though.
I mean, G2 kind of aren't like that. It's a little bit complicated, though. G2 have said they're working more on their early game stuff now. Yeah. I think just to add to that, we've talked about the Blade of the Ruined King thing a little bit before. I actually do think it has had an impact on making some games more recently a bit more snowbally. Just because if you get your Blade of the Ruined King power spike early, you can do a lot of damage with that. So I think that has also had an impact as well.
Now, the final thing I'll say on this topic, Mark was sitting next to me during Game 5, and he was so hypey. He was just freaking out. He's like, oh my, this game is amazing. Like, I'm going to have a heart attack. I feel like vomiting right now. And he literally said, I'm interested to see if he recants this or not, but he literally said these are the best finals that NA has ever had. Emily just made a really weird face.
Hold on. So there's a difference between like, wow, this is the best finals from like a gameplay perspective, and when it's like super, super hype. So I was talking more about the hype, and then even that day, I don't know why Travis still bringing this up. Like that, even as the game was still going on, right after I said that, I was actually like, no, season 4 between TSM and C9, when it was the first time C9 had lost in the playoffs, going to Worlds. I said I instantly took it back, and I was like, wait, that was way more hype, because they had that crazy team fight with like that final like super crit that like Turtle got, where he got like 3 crits in a row. Like I instantly changed my mind. So I don't know why you're bringing that up right now.
Well, I'm bringing it up so that I could get the expression on Emily's face. But,
so it could be laughed at.
I mean,
well, no, it's just funny because like I walk into the office on Monday, and Zarina's sitting in the desk next to me, and she's like, "How are the NA finals?" And I was like, "Well, they weren't good, but they were fun and exciting." Like, and that was kind of my reaction. So I just thought it was funny.
I don't know. I liked them a lot. Kelsey probably didn't like them.
I mean, I'm not as hyped about NA, right? I will openly admit that, but I had a similar experience with like the quarterfinal between IMA and OMG, just because the storyline was so good. I actually turned off my brain for like the first 4 games, and then I got to Game 5 and I'm like, wait, what are these teams doing? This is terrible. What is this? But the series itself was like really hype and really exciting, and the storyline was like almost perfect. It was ridiculously scripted. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I think as an analyst, sometimes it's hard to turn off that part of your brain that's like, wait, that was a horrible decision. And you're just like, wow, another solo kill. Like you kind of have to flip that switch. And then there's like when you're in the event too for this one, just because there's so much random stuff happening, there's like a pigeon flying around and like landing on stage, and you're just like, what am I watching? The whole event was like crazy, and I think that's why being there in particular, not just watching online, you kind of had that extra hype factor.
Yeah, very good. Well, next up, it's time to talk about when we put them. This topic is the number 2 topic because they're the number 2 region behind North America. When you rank both of them, we've got EU finals. Kelsey, what's sort of your take on the EU finals, and what's the question that you want to ask?
So there are a lot of nuances to this topic, and one is that, you know, Fnatic kind of felt like they put up a little bit more of a fight in some of the games than Unicorns of Love did, just because they did have more of that early game focus. Unicorns of Love, I think, had way worse side lane control, again, as we talk about this sort of issue going into the series. G2 had a pretty strong performance. So the question is that, like, have G2 kind of improved as a team? And are they going to be able to have a better showing at MSI than they did last year, and then also that they did at Worlds? Or are they going to just kind of really be disappointing again, drop out, not like the G2-8 meme, right?
Yeah.
How
Kelsey,
do we feel?
For those
that,
for those like myself that missed the EU finals, or I caught the end of it because I was in the arena, but I was busy that morning, obviously.
Were you like covering your eyes the entire time?
Yeah,
Were you
yeah.
like, Europe, no.
No, actually, what is really I was talking to somebody about this, Bonnie, actually, because I was hanging out with her, Peter's girlfriend. But we were watching the finals, and it's really fun to see. They always do this. They broadcast the EU finals or the EU games in the NA arenas, and it's really fun because the NA fans, like as they're filtering, and actually get. It's like the one time I've ever seen North American fans care about what's going on in Europe. But it is really cool. But for those of us that didn't see, can you give a very, very light breakdown of what happened? I don't need play-by-play or picks and bans, but I mean, how many games and what did it look like?
I mean, I think the first game is probably the most G2 game that we would have seen, which is just they like to play like these kinds of scaling picks, and if they can get into a position where they're also counter picking the enemy team with them, this is ideal for them. Like they like the scaling rumble jungle, right? That will just do full clears and be happy and go back, and then they like being able to play Gangplank into Shen matchups like this. So I think that's very telling of what the kind of thing we see with G2. We saw them mix it up a bit. We saw like the Elise come out. We saw Rengar, Ivern. I think it's really fun to watch Perks play LeBlanc sometimes, just because he will be like super aggressive, and that was always his calling card before. And I also always used to think G2 felt like really like a snowball-y team last year. So that's something that they're really good at. I would say overall G2's like reactionary player is really good, but when you see G2 make a proactive play, something like this, it really usually dovetails off of or works off of Trick. And I feel like a lot of times the primary consideration in these instances in their early games is, can Trick beat the enemy jungler? And sometimes there are a lot of other factors to take into consideration, like the teleports that maybe they don't go through as quickly. Some of their transitions to lanes when they're after the first turrets drop, when they're taking the initiative themselves, are not as good. But they're really good at matching, or they're really good at trading sides and things like this. So that's kind of the summary of how I feel. Unicorns of Love, on the contrast, I mean, they're kind of NA-ish in the sense that they love the fighting around mid lane all the time. They really focus on the Baron setup behind the Baron pit, things like this. So you can kind of picture in your head how the series went.
Yeah. All right. So back to the question: will G2 flop again?
I hope not.
Before we get into like G2 specifically, I feel like the term flopping is a little bit overused for Western teams. We're not expecting them to go out and dominate. Like I think most of the time.
Are you saying G2 hasn't flopped
Okay.
at the
No,
last
no, 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 no.
international
The
event?
thing is, yeah, previously G2 were favored to make it out of their Worlds group, and were pegged as the best Western team at MSI.
I was going to say a lot of teams get accused of flopping, and I feel like it's kind of like, well, it's, like C9 like barely got out of groups, and then they died in quarters. It's like that's what you expected, and some people still said like, oh, they disappointed. Whereas like G2 literally were horrible. The two were like international performances they had, like unbelievably bad looking, getting smashed by everyone. So like, I just want to clarify that, like, yes, this team actually has had horrendous international showings. Not like TSM, like, oh, they were overrated, they barely didn't get out of groups. This was like, this team had no chance, it seemed like. So,
Yeah.
So
I mean,
the question is, will G2 flop again? And you're like, well, they flopped the last 2 times.
no, I'm saying like they flopped so hard in the past that like I don't think that they're gonna flop that hard again.
Okay.
and just coming in second place at IEM, like, give them any sort of gravitas at all?
I don't. Nobody cares
not
about
sure.
that.
IEM is like
does,
not a tournament.
But
Yeah,
I think that one thing that is curious to me about G2 specifically, and a thing that we touched upon earlier when talking about TSM and NA, is the fact that G2 are really willing to your point, Kelsey, a lot of it goes through Trick. They kind of wait for him a bit in the early game, and that's why it's one of the reasons why I think I'm a little bit critical of their early game, even though I like Trick as a jungler. But they are one of the teams going into this event that does that. And the other team that does that is actually SKT. Like, I don't know if people know, like SKT are not, despite, you know, the game 3 and the Korea finals, like which was kind of stompy, but like they're not this like super hardcore early game team. And what they kind of do is they wait and then they make really smart decisions in the mid to late game to overcome their opponents. And the thing that really interests me about G2 specifically is that they're another team that kind of waits and hangs back. And so I'm wondering how that's going to work out against teams like, and I know we're going to talk about them later, but like the Flash Wolves, which are known for just having this very strong early game.
Well, and again, we were just talking about how this meta right now favors early game strength, right? I mean, that's what you were mentioning, Mark.
But
I wouldn't necessarily say that G2 are a team that kind of waits. I feel like they're more a team that tries things early and fumbles.
Okay.
You guys are so polite to each other. Kelsey's like, I wouldn't really say that. And Emily just is like, okay. A little bit of
SKT
attention.
is kind of a... I mean, SKT has done some stuff that's a little fumbly, but they are much more of a wait team than G2 is, I think. The one... You say addressing the point of the early game so that I don't feel like I'm randomly taking stuff away is that I do think that there is a lot of snowballing going on, but I think you can control the snowball still. Like, there are still a lot of answers for it, and I think SKT do that very well. So,
yeah.
I mean, not to start a debate here, but I do kind of agree with what Weldon's point was way back then. That like, if you can't play the mid game out well, like it's super hard to actually win a series. So like in that regard, because you can't guarantee that like, oh man, that jungle pattern is going to work this time, and so like in that regard, mid game has always been extremely important, and that's why you still see a lot of the top teams have strong mid games. So like, I'll agree with that degree, and I still.
I mean, I don't think it has to be either or. Like,
well, yeah, it's
I
not
would
mutually
say,
exclusive.
I would say like the way you beat. So taking SKT as an example, the way that you would beat SKT is actually by snowballing early and then keeping that lead. Like, if KT Rolster actually knew what they were doing mid game and didn't like fumble their early to mid execution so much, I would say they're kind of the perfect team to beat SKT because they get those early leads and then snowball them.
You know who's the perfect team to beat SKT?
Who?
Envy. With Lyra.
I don't know what's happening right now.
No, it's a joke because they have such good early game,
the
but they just suck.
Flash Wolves are actually the perfect team to beat SKT because they theoretically have 3 times invested ones.
Giant asterisk.
And also with the theoretically, by the way. They theoretically have.
Well, they have.
They actually have, but yeah.
Okay, so
and they're an early game team also. They're one of the most like definitively early game teams I think at this event is Flash Wolves.
But to get back to your question, will G2 flop again? Like, what? I don't feel like G2 has ever flopped because no one's ever like, oh, they got exposed. Like they've always been playing at this caliber. It's like they go to the international event and then they just tumble, right? Like it's almost like an emotional thing. Like they'd all just start falling apart on the stage. Like that's at least been the story that I've understood, you know?
Well, I mean, like the first MSI, there was a very clear, well, behind the scenes, there was a clear reason why that team struggled. And I don't think anyone who, follows the scene was like, oh, I can't believe they didn't do better given those circumstances.
A lot of people were pretty mad.
Yeah, a lot of people were, but like not as much at the players from my understanding. It was like you're replacing people and it's gotten to the players.
Also
now
vacation.
I don't know. The players,
don't forget about the vacation.
Well, the players' attitudes.
Unnecessary flame.
Yeah, but like
for that.
There was a lot of stuff going on. I personally was like, okay, this is just a crappy situation, and I don't think that like they would have performed that much better. Given that like they heard that a lot of the players were getting replaced, or the bot lane at least. So I understand that one. Worlds though was just actually a huge flop for me, where I was just like, these guys suck. Like people were talking them up like a top 5 team in the tournament, potentially like semifinals. They might go to finals. Like everyone was so hyped up on G2, and they just they couldn't beat anyone. They just looked awful.
I agree and disagree with the idea that it's a primarily emotional thing. I do think that there are a few things that were definitely challenged at Worlds for G2. Like, throughout the entire summer split, Perks had trouble transitioning into more of a mage-focused meta. There were issues with Mithy and Trick coordinating more. And just it's actually funny because there's a series of interviews with Mithy, if you were like, keeping track of like the people who were doing interviews with the teams that were in boot camp, where like I interviewed him once and then I interviewed him a second time, and that's a whole different story. And then like this other guy for ESPN interviewed him, and then it's almost like it became progressively the story. It starts out, it's like, okay, yeah, we have some expectations, and it's like we're just learning all the stuff that we didn't know in the second one, and then the third one it's like, yeah, we still don't know anything kind of situation. So I think they had part of it was mental in the sense that they felt like they were so behind, and part of it was just they actually were behind.
Okay, so the question is, will G2 flop again? We're going to go yes or no down the line to wrap this up. Emily.
Provided that they don't disrespect their opponents, yes. Because I do think one thing that should
yes, they will flop?
No, they won't. Sorry. One thing that I did want to touch upon that I almost forgot until you just turned it over to me again is that I do think that there was a modicum of disrespect against Albus Nox the first time they played them. And that did actually end up being a slight factor in their placement. And it also could have contributed to the mentality thing as well. So I think G2 should watch out for that going forward. And I hope that doesn't happen again. Just because that, in my mind, that kind of creates a snowball effect, right? Where they already put a lot of pressure on themselves because they failed at international events before. They go in, they lose to Albus Nox Luna, and then suddenly they're like, holy crap, like it's happening again. This is really bad. And a lot of it just had to do with some sort of disrespect in the draft. Like if they had just banned champions that everyone knew, Albus Nox, you should ban against Albus Nox Luna, they could have won that game. So I think that was a really weird group in general, and I think there are a lot of like small things that kind of led to the snowball that was G2 flopping. And provided that they research their opponents, I think they should be okay. Like they shouldn't just completely flop.
Okay, so the answer is no from Emily. They won't flop again. Mark?
Not being an expert on the region, I'll just say no, I don't think so. Because what happened the previous two times, I just don't think will happen again from what I saw of like the finals and things like that. Because I don't know, that group was a bad group. Weird. That group was awful. I don't think like any good team should have like struggled getting out of that group. That's how I think. Rox didn't care. Like they clearly like were like, we're gonna get out, and that's why they struggled a little bit. And then CLG and G2 legitimately were bad in losing to like. They just made horrible decisions, like that draft that CLG had again. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think those kind of mistakes will happen again.
There's a lot of weird stuff.
Okay, so next up, Kelsey. To your own question.
I actually have a lot of trouble with this one. I think that
I want a decisive answer because we're 30 minutes in the show and we've only talked about two things.
I think that they won't flop, but the caveat is that you have to contextualize what would be a flop, because I still think they'll have trouble against teams coming out of LMS. Or the team coming out of LMS. The team coming out of LPL might give them some trouble, and definitely SKT. So losing to those teams, I don't think necessarily would be a flop. Losing, like getting humiliated by TSM, I think would be a flop.
All right. I'm going to say they're going to flop again because everybody else is saying they're not. And if it happens, I get to gloat.
And you hate Europe.
And hey, the last, really quickly, we're going to do this. I know we've been answering a lot and going on, but I do want to ask this question. Cat Daddy Dance in Twitch chat says, TSM versus G2, who wins? Mark, TSM versus G2, who wins?
I need to watch a little bit more G2.
So TSM.
But based off what I saw from the finals, I would say G2.
Damn it. All right. Emily?
I'm going to say G2. I think I would have waffled on this if you'd asked me during the regular season.
Right.
But now, especially that Perks has really kind of stepped up throughout the playoffs, I'm going to say that G2 would win.
We already have the best European mid laner in North America. So how's Perks going to... Okay, anyway.
We should make
It's
this
not
a
Kelsey,
about
topic.
it's not
Kelsey?
about the
I think this
1v1
would be a
matchup,
fun
Travis.
topic.
Kelsey.
But it is an interesting topic, yeah.
Is
Kelsey.
Bjergsen the best mid laner in the West would be a fun topic
Kelsey.
one week.
TSM versus G2.
Okay, I think I'll go G2.
All right, my vote. TSM, everybody. TSM would expose that whole team.
I wish
you know?
I wish this was like Travis joking about being like the NA fanboy, but this is actually
not.
yeah. He's like, oh, this is great. Now I can pretend I'm being the contrarian, but I really just love North America.
I actually had, an EU manager message me. It's like, so you're going to Yahoo. Are you allowed to do like EU content in it? So like
That's too good. All right. Well, anyway, whenever we get back, we will be talking about, let's look at what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the MVP voting controversy, if top teams are just way better than everybody else right now, because playoffs have been interesting across the different regions, and more. We'll be right back after this break.
Top 5 it was.
That's it. I quit.
I'm so sorry.
There's no way you get that.
I played pretty much every game with my brother. We played a lot of N64 games together, a lot of PS2 games together. He would play with all of his friends and I would join with them. And looking back, it's kind of weird because if I had a younger brother 5 years younger than me, I probably wouldn't let him play any games with me and my friends.
We really play a lot of video games together. That's kind of what connected us in a way that gapped the age difference between us. You know, we had different friends, we went to different schools for almost our entire lives, but we always had that together.
Everything he did, I kind of copied, I think. And if it weren't for him, I'd probably be a completely different person today.
If you're wondering what that last clip was during the break, that's actually Moon Rising, which is a feature that I worked on alongside a guy named Broden here. Also, Simon helped out some folks on our team here. It's actually just a look at Moon's story coming into LCS and his professional play. And so I highly recommend everybody take a look at it. It's up on our YouTube and also on our site, and I think is a kind of a fascinating story about the guy. But as we get, it sounds like we're getting Kelsey back on the line in a second here. But as we wait for that, Emily, do you want to start us off on our next topic about top teams and what's going on there?
Yeah. So this past week, the Korea finals also happened. I don't know if you're aware of that this weekend.
I
what?
SKT versus KT.
So there's like a big viewing party in Vancouver. Like a lot of media guys are gonna do it and like watch. And then my internet crapped out on me and where I was staying, so I couldn't watch. So I had to like rewatch quickly.
Anyway, it was it got kind of stompy towards the end, and basically the Korea finals had no winning team lost a game to the losing team. It was all sweeps throughout the bracket. And I thought this was kind of interesting. And typically, a lot of times in Korea, in past splits, specifically last year, you could kind of go into the playoff bracket and you could be like, okay, everyone's seeded up. This is how it's going to happen. And it was very easy to predict like which team was going to beat this team, etc. This time, aside from Samsung losing to KT, which is kind of a weird matchup thing where I think Samsung matches up well against SKT when they're playing at their best, and KT matches up well against Samsung, but not SKT. We had like SKT is the definitive like best team in Korea by a pretty significant margin. And I actually ended up writing up this topic like during NA finals because I was like, oh man, TSM are just gonna stomp C9 and like, what does that mean for NA? But then obviously we had a very shaky back and forth final that went to all 5 games. So I guess I just wanted to chat about different finals in the regions, if you guys have seen a lot of like parity or lack thereof, and what it means for a team to be consistently at the top of their region if there is a gap between them and the rest of the region, and how does that fare for those teams going into MSI?
I mean, you mentioned that this could have been, or that you were writing this up thinking TSM was going to stop, but I think it still applies in North America where we saw really like a very silly semifinals, right? And then Cloud9 and TSM looking, I don't know, pretty close in the finals. So you could make the argument C9 and TSM just way beyond the rest of the teams in the league. And so, yeah, it is kind of interesting to sort of see, like, I think there was so much talk about parity this year, especially in North America. But then we start to see, like, it just, again, feel like there's just 2 teams, or in some cases even 1 team that's way better than the rest.
Well, and especially when you get into best of 5, I think that's also a huge thing. Or in Korea, there is one like the quote-unquote wild card round where it's a best of 3. But it was just funny to me because previously I went in and I was like, oh man, I know exactly how this is going to go. Afrika's going to beat MVP, and then, MVP could beat KT, but KT will probably beat them, and then KT will lose to Samsung, then Samsung will end up playing SKT, and that's not at all what happened. But they were still all like they were all sweeps. So I guess I'm not sure if that contributes to how snowball-y the game is, which we've spoken about, mentality, just general matchup sense. And I just wanted to chat about that before we see a lot of these teams heading into the mid-season invitational, and we might not know as much about them.
I personally think that like there's always, in the best of 5, a team, if you're like a full tier in skill like above the team that you're playing, you pretty much 3-0 or 3-1 them, and it doesn't look close. Even though you might actually be within your region relatively close, you're like, that's the number 2 team and that's the number 1 team, or these are the 1 and 2 teams playing the 3 and 4 teams. If they're actually like a full kind of tier ahead of them, it doesn't look close. And I think most of the time that's the case. Sometimes in less skilled regions, you get just scrappier games because even the better team is not like super consistent. But for the most part, like even NA almost was all sweeps. If CLG did not, get reverse swept by FlyQuest, they could have easily ended up against TSM, and then the same thing happens. I think TSM probably sweeps them. So
that was kind of a sweep,
Yeah, it was like half a sweep one way, then a full sweep the other way. Yeah. So I think like you almost even saw that in NA as well, where it's like okay. So I think it tends to happen, and especially like when you start comparing between regions, it's the same kind of thing where like TSM last split. In summer, we're like a super good team in North America. They crushed everyone. They go up against international competition, and they're clearly probably like a tier below the top teams in some of the other regions. So I think it's kind of just a symptom of what happens in League of Legends, where it's like, okay, you no longer get individual advantages, and then your shot calling is a little bit worse, and then your objective control is a little bit worse, and like maybe your draft phase is a little bit worse. And when you compile all those things on top of each other, even though you're not actually significantly worse overall, it looks that way.
Yeah.
Kelsey? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's been a clear top team in most of the regions. Even during the regular season, I felt like, yeah, P1 was kind of bringing some parity, but if it came down to TSM versus Cloud9, it was going to be TSM, right? I think that SKT was a pretty clear favorite for most of the Korean split. Flash Wolves we'll talk about a little bit. Like, it's so extreme that I call it the Flash Wolves region just because there are practically no other teams. I think that LPL might be the one exception.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Going into even the semifinal, I was like super, I don't know. I felt like there is kind of a 3-way. You sort of hinted at this with Korea, but in LPL there's kind of a 3-way between EDG, RNG, and WE. And even this final, people are asking me, like, who's going to win, WE or RNG? And I'm kind of going, WE should win, but they just kind of screw up sometimes.
Yeah, I think RNG is going to win. That would be my guess.
No, I honestly have no idea. I had no predictions.
Yeah, my prediction would be RNG. After watching the LPL playoffs, I think just RNG.
Tell us more, Travis. Yeah. This sounds like something you're well educated on.
Yeah. Well, the semis were 3-1s each. So
I'm convinced based off of Travis's reasoning now. Okay.
Yeah, see? Yeah. Don't worry. I know a lot about LPL, so I'll give you some details. But, I mean, one question is, by the way, we're talking a lot about all these top teams being so much better. Does any of it matter when MSI is literally just the top team from each region?
Well, that kind of plays into what I was saying, where like if you are like a tierish below, because you'll actually just kind of get crushed, I think. So like unless the teams are super close, like I think for P1 FlyQuest, that was an example where I was like, I don't know who's going to win this one, and the game's kind of played out where you thought it was like pretty like jungler dependent, and like whoever got ahead off jungle plays basically won the game, and that's a series you can look at and be like, these teams are not like significantly better in some areas that they're going to crush them, and then when you do get to that area where it's like, okay, this team has a clear advantage, like SKT's mid game is so good, like TSM will not get any early advantages, or if they do, they won't be significant enough, and blah blah blah. And then you run that through a 5-game series, it's like they probably don't take a game, right?
Oh, you mean like TSM versus SKT?
Yeah.
But you're assuming that like Cloud9 is at least as good as KT, or what? Like in a world where Cloud9 is better than KT,
no.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like okay. I don't think Cloud9 is as good as KT. At all.
Really?
That's not.
I believe it.
And that's why you're the host.
Okay.
No, I don't think Cloud9 is even like KT level, right? So that's what I'm saying is like, even though TSM might be like a tier, maybe 2 tiers behind SKT, like they probably get dominated. And like G2 versus TSM, that one I think is actually pretty close. But then like versus whoever comes out of the LPL, or from how much people are hyping up Flash Wolves.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're setting up for like a terrible Western showing at MSI.
I would kind of agree with that. I did not feel like particularly like, wow, we got a good team out of NA. And then from like what I saw the European region, didn't really feel that way. Maybe it changed in playoffs because I heard Perks stepped up a lot. But at least for me coming out of NA, I'm like, I hope we get through the second round of the play-in. and then I hope we win some games, and then let's go home. Let's pack it up.
Yeah. Well, so are all the top teams so much better is the question. It seems like they kind of are. That might answer it.
Yeah.
I mean, do we want to ask, like, does this matter? I think that's the...
I mean, I don't think it does, right? We're going to MSI
much...
where the top teams are all going to be there. And, I mean, to some extent, I guess maybe if you are significantly above... Like, if you're looking at SKT and, as you said, like, KT maybe isn't that bad of a team and they're able to still dominate them, that probably gives you an idea of what's going to happen there. What was that face, Emily?
KT or bad.
Emily makes a lot of faces, I think, where she doesn't want to, like, it's like...
Okay, so would you say
no,
C9 is
I would not at all. I would
okay.
not at all. I'm just sad that KT lost, but I think they have a lot to work on.
I mean, maybe it's a problem in the sense that it's like, all right, SKT is going to win again, and then as soon as your region's knocked out, you're like, I don't care. But that's kind of been a problem, air quotes, for the past couple years anyways.
Sure. All right, so as we move into the next question, I do want to just throw this out there. Ras Spencer 103 in chat says, why is Mark dressed like a hobo that has just lost his house after a Silver Scrapes performance? I appreciate people blasting Mark for showing up in this.
It's just a hoodie.
He's had a hard
I
time.
don't know.
Somebody was commenting earlier about how you went from a suit in League Weekly to this. The feels bad man meme was there. All right. MVP voting controversy. So MVP voting came out. Mark, you want to talk to us a little bit?
Right. So I know this might also apply a little bit to the European region, but for North America, prior to the announcement coming out and even the leak, a lot of people were talking about how Hanser is clearly the MVP, and Doublelift, kind of rallied the TSM fanboys when he had a similar opinion, and a lot of fans were making it sound like it's a shoo-in for Hanser to win. It turns out Arrow wins, the ballot gets leaked, and of course, as always, people freak out when they see that happen. So they, kind of raged at Arrow, and I think it raises an interesting question because people don't seem to have a definitive definition of what the MVP is, and it can mean different things for different people voting. And I think that's why you tend to see such difference in like people's opinions and how strongly they have them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of it, for me, it comes down to how people define most valuable player. And while, we kind of spoke about this as well with the Rookie of the Split award, where I said, like, if I would give a most improved award, it would be the Cody Sun. But then I gave the actual award to Contracts. I think that a lot of it comes down to people's criteria, and because we can't see that going into the voting, I think that's a huge issue because people like if this is all that's leaked, right? All you do is look at the votes and then you just see like, oh, you know, like for example, I'm just going to take the top one. Like Zyrene voted for Arrow, Jensen, Hanser. And like there's no context as to why he voted that. Like he just voted it. I think that's what has kind of allowed a lot of people to like snowball this. I think another thing that I brought up previously when talking about MVP voting is that there is a weird situation that teams and coaches are put in when they have to vote on this award because they have players in the region that are up for this award that they either can't vote for because then their votes become invalid. Or, you know, like it sometimes puts them in an awkward situation. And I think one of the weird or a lot of the commentary I saw around it was that people were thinking that the voting itself was a bit like weird for teams, and in which case, like, I don't side on one side or the other with that, but I do think, again, this is another situation where asking teams and coaches to vote it puts them in kind of an odd position, because if they did vote like above the level, this is exactly who I think it is, etc. If they didn't and they're trying to get a specific player, like, I'm not even saying this is happening, but the fact that they are voting leaves it open for interpretation, right? And that's where a lot of this argument and a lot of the hate that I saw directed towards Arrow, which I thought was really awful, that's where a lot of this argument, I think, is coming from, is that ambiguity, right?
So I think we've talked a lot previously on the show about like the process and sort of the frustration around having teams there, so I don't want to rehash that too much, but the thing I definitely want to direct the conversation towards is, Mark, did you put Hanser as your number one?
No, I think I did Arrow, Jensen, Hanser. Okay. And
what was interesting here though was that you actually had Hanser in your top three. My vote, which was actually an amalgamation of Kelsey, Emily, Taylor, and then I was usually like the tiebreaker. We didn't even put Hanser in there.
Right, and I think that's a fair opinion to have. People on Reddit made it sound like you had to be insane to not leave or to like not put Hanser on your ballot. But I think it comes down to, because I think when they ask the question of, you know, who's your MVP, it's like, who is the best performing player in the league is how the question's phrased or something like that. And the thing is, it's not who's the best player in the league. And I think if you ask that question, the award becomes infinitely more boring, because I'm going to write Bjergsen every time. I firmly believe that, like, pretty much day in, day out, that dude's the best player in the league. And, like, sure, he'll have splits and metas and teammates where he'll look better and worse based off performance. But, like, just in terms of raw ability to impact the game for his entire team, Bjergsen would win the split every time.
A lot of people were saying Hanser was outperforming Bjergsen this split.
Right, and that's why I put Hanser over Bjergsen.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm saying that,
you still think Bjergsen is more...
Right, so it's like, how important was Hanser for TSM? Because when Double Lift stepped down, they lost a shot-calling element. Hanser clearly stepped up. He was very valuable for that team. He became another carry threat. He starts playing Camille and Rumble a lot and, like, getting these, like, counter picks. And for me, that was very valuable. And I think that is what influences my voting, is I think, like, if you replace that player with another player, what impact does it have on that team? How good were they relative to their peers? And those kinds of questions. And so that's, for me, why I voted Arrow a little bit higher, is because I can't think of many, if any, AD carry you could replace on P1 with him. That would have
their position falls significantly.
And it's true that it's like a little unfair to be like, okay, Arrow's position's weaker, which raises his value, but that's supply and demand, people. That's like economics 101. Like, if you have something really useful that no one else has, that is valuable. So for me, when I look at the AD carry position, I'm like, no one could have done what Arrow did for that team. Maybe no one can do what Hanser did for TSM, but there's at least closer competition there, as well as the fact that that team, ultimately to me, still rests on Bjergsen's shoulders. I think he is the most important member of that team, and despite what you want to say about Hanser having a great season, I think Bjergsen's still the critical member of TSM. And similarly, that's why I put Jensen ahead as well. His Orianna games at the end of the season, as well as his Echo at the beginning, and like all these different things he was pulling out, I thought he was super critical for C9, because their early game sucked, and if they don't have the best laning mid laner in the league, that team is a disaster in the early game. So those are the kind of factors I'm weighing, versus just like, Hanser, pretty good guy, maybe the stood out the most or something. I don't know how you guys weigh your MVP stuff.
So yeah, I think I agree with you in terms of it's not the best player. I also agree that MVP shouldn't be the best player in the position in the league, and he might not even be the best player on his team. So it really depends on how you define MVP. I probably have had some of the most controversial MVP votes because I always prefer to give the MVP to the player who sets up and creates the opportunity rather than the player who capitalizes on it. Because you can, like, I had this specific exchange with someone recently where they said, yeah, but I don't think where I said I think the map pressure that Bjergsen exerts and the amount of opportunities he creates for Hanser is just like really, really valuable. So I would rate him as an MVP over Hanser. And they said, yes, but I don't think any other top laner could have capitalized like Hanser. It's like you don't actually know that because they don't have the opportunities created that Hanser has had created. So I feel like it's a little bit of a difficult argument to make that Hanser is the MVP in that context specifically. Another issue, which is that I probably had one of the most controversial third votes, was I picked Impact because I went all the way back to the start of the season where I felt like C9 were really, really far ahead of the pack. And I asked, like, why was that? What was Impact doing? Who was the standout player, and like what were they doing for the team at that time? And then Impact had like these really consistent setups for team fights, these really consistent flanks, these really consistent side positions. Ultimately, also, if you look at my top lane, who is the best top laner vote, I had Hanser like way above Impact. So I think Hanser is probably the best top laner in the league, but is he the MVP of the league? That's a different question.
Yeah. I mean, like, I would have put Lyra on my MVP. I talk so much about Lyra, I know, but legitimately, I would have put him on my MVP ballot if he got that team out of relegations. I probably would have given him the third spot if there was some like crazy scenario where even in week 10 or week 9, excuse me, they weren't eliminated and they could have got into the 8th spot. And if he got the team to the 8th spot and he had good performances in week 9, I would have put him on there because no one could have ever dragged that team up to the level that he did. And because they still ended up 10th, it kind of, you have to say it didn't matter. Despite as great as he was, the team still was the worst team in the league. But that's what I kind of weigh is like, as well as like you're saying, it's important to note like what did they actually make their team do that they wouldn't have done? Like, would TSM still have been the #1 team with a lot of other top laners? Like, maybe.
Mark, as the NA expert, I have 2 questions for you. Why would you give Arrow ADC when Doublelift didn't get it last split? Which was, I think, the #1 thing I saw in the Reddit thread about this. And I know you're the blame game guy, so you can talk about this.
Yeah, let me just, I don't know how Emily and Kelsey feel about it, but one, it's just stupid to be like, wow, an 80 carry won in a different situation, a totally different landscape, when last season there was arguably a more dominant 80 carry and he didn't get it. It's like, yeah, it's 2 totally different like splits. You can't just take one thing. Like, yeah, I would agree. Doublelift had a more dominant summer split on a team that was just full of weapons and tools that like could win a million different ways. So like, yeah, Doublelift doesn't get the MVP when he's on literally an all-star team. And that's how I felt. So like sure, he created a lot of opportunities. From what I heard, he was very vocal. He called the resources down to him to allow him to snowball. Very, very important player. Very close to being an MVP from you know, like what people were saying.
So the second question I have for you, where would you have ranked Huhi? Top 3? If you could, I mean, why wasn't he in your top 3?
Because he dropped off and he was too erratic. Like if he played like
I'm
the
just
first,
memeing because you know.
Well, I don't
actually.
meme.
Well, actually, no.
Along that line,
as the #1 Huhi apologist on this desk, probably. No, that's actually a joke because Kelsey and I were joking about who we had the most images of, like in the back end when we both worked for the Score, and hers is Clear Love, and I was wondering what mine was. I thought it was going to be Bengi. It actually ended up being Huhi. I think Huhi does a lot more for CLG than people realize, though.
Yeah,
I did just want to say that, but it's also really weird. Like then you get into intangibles and rating players on that when you're not like actually on the team, which is a whole other different beast. What I did want to bring up though, that's kind of ancillary to all of these arguments, is that what to do with a team like TSM with a player like Faker, because obviously it's like a lot of people have been comparing it to the LeBron effect, or like if you want to say within League of Legends itself, like the Faker effect. How much do you consider Faker's specific performance on that team, just how good he is, how much nuanced, small stuff he does in the mid lane to, help get a jungler up to speed with the rest of the team, help like his bot lane out, roam top if they need to, like just, and those are like basic things. I'm talking about warding patterns, when to push, how he controls minion waves, like all of these things. Like Bjergsen is that, but for NA, which makes TSM a specifically tricky team to evaluate because, and I think that's another reason why some people maybe are either like some fans in the community are either a little bit burnt out on people continuously choosing Bjergsen, even though like it's really hard not to choose Bjergsen, right? Or they're like, well, you don't recognize like this person's talents because Bjergsen is that good. And for me personally, it's really difficult for me to separate how a player like that affects the rest of their team because it's such an important part of how the team itself operates for me.
We have to hurry along because we're a little bit behind on the show today. But really quickly, I do want to give Kelsey and Emily, you guys, a chance to talk about your EU MVP vote because you also got kind of blown up for not picking Perks. Do you want to address that at all?
I think if I had to pick an MVP again, and I did include this in the article write-up, I would probably pick Vizicachi, even just based on the regular split, just because of how much Vizicachi did for Unicorns of Love. But at the time of the voting, I sort of rated the fact that G2 was just such the better team in my head, and Sven's impact really highly. The reason why I picked Sven is because I felt like even with Mithy underperforming, it was like a rare case where the AD carry was still doing really well. He had a lot of lane pressure in the bottom, and the fact that G2 is a team that really requires lane pressure because Trick needs to get online, Trick needs to find opportunities to invade and not get punished for the invades. So to me, Sven was really huge. Perks was a little bit less consistent, and you may say that that's maybe because of the competition of mid lane in EU, which is always really high, and he wasn't able to consistently generate this kind of lane pressure. But to me, it was like, okay, Perks started to look really, really good toward the end of the split, and the casters on the desk were all saying, yeah, I think my MVP is Perks. And then towards the end, it was just like people were saying and making up all of these crazy things like, oh, the players and the coaches all think Perks is good, but these dumb third-party media people, why are they voting for Sven? But even the players voted for Sven, okay? If you actually look at the votes, majority, Sven had 5 first place, 5 second place, and 3 third place, and then in the Perks had 3 first place and none of the other ones. So it was really a weird phenomenon where Reddit was of this opinion that Perks was, everyone thought Perks was the best, and it was just Yahoo Esports is really dumb and picked Sven or something. I don't know, it was very odd.
Kelsey, we're moving on. I'm sorry,
I was
Mark.
going to say, the only other thing I'd like to say is I feel bad for Smoothie. If anyone got the shortest end of the stick through all this, even the outrage about people not talking about him, it'd probably be Smoothie. I think he deserved a lot more votes than he got, even though I didn't vote for him. I wish I
not in my top, but he was my third pick.
Yeah. I wish there was another vote. I could throw a 4th his way.
Kelsey, you want to talk to us about the IMA remake controversy that happened? I've only gotten a bit of the knowledge on this. So
I thought you watched.
Yeah, didn't you watch
Did you
all
sit
of
through the whole break
LPL
track?
playoffs?
No. I mean, what it is that I went back and watched the VOD specifically of the games because I was busy, and so I wasn't able to capture the true controversy and that kind of thing. So.
Okay, well, there is a very detailed news post with a lot of the information on the website that both you and I happen to work for.
No, I know, and it's amazing, but I just hearing it specifically from you. It was way better.
So what happened was there was, in the first game of IMA versus OMG quarterfinal, Road had, and they released a clip of it. We'll probably play the clip on screen at some point, where you can very clearly see, if we can play the clip now would be great. You can very clearly see that Road is sort of stuttering in lane, and he's pausing, and he's having some trouble along the way. they paused the game and they said, his mouse isn't working, and this was a cap that they put on Weibo because this occurred off-screen play, and then OMG show up and they just kill him, right, and he dies. So
how were they able to get it? Sorry, really quickly, how were they able to get it if it was off-screen?
Well, they went through the footage of the game, right? Like the people who were doing,
they use
the referees,
footage.
I'm just curious. I don't, because normally whenever something's happening off screen, they don't actually show it on the broadcast, right? I'm just curious how the video came out.
They posted on Weibo. When
Riot or the referees or whoever. Okay, sorry.
And so first of all, there was the controversy because you see the part where Road is clearly unable to move, and there's 8 seconds someone counted where he could have been notifying someone, and it turned out they actually listened to the comms and they showed OMG the comms where he was trying to say, okay, pause the game, and the referee didn't respond, and his teammate who speaks Chinese because Road is Korean was trying to tell all chat that, oh my god, there's a mouse problem, please don't do anything. So effectively, OMG agreed to the remake, right? But then there was a really, really long, dragged-out argument because the LPL rules all say that you have to remake pick and ban if you do a remake at all. And OMG were like, this has nothing to do with pick ban. Why are we remaking pick and ban? So they eventually remade the game, same pick ban, and OMG lost. And they lost the second game, and then they reverse swept. But the point is that the reason why this was so controversial is if you look back in IMA's history, every single playoff or every major best of 5 they've had, or every major tournament they've had, 2016 summer 3rd place match against WE, Demacia Cup, which was an off-season tournament that is really important to fans because that's when they give out the end of year awards and things like this, where they had a game against Snake. They had a remake, and then this time around, their playoffs match in spring against OMG, they have a remake, and it's all due to hardware malfunctions, right? Reporting hardware malfunctions. And so this is why a lot of fans were just really, really mad and really critical of IMA because they feel like there's something really negative going on, and there's just... So when OMG ended up having a reverse sweep, because both those two previous instances, IMA won those best of 5s. So when OMG had the reverse sweep, people had this kind of hero glow around them. Even during the pause, Icon, the mid laner of OMG, goes onto Weibo and posts "Justice will prevail." This type of situation was going on. So it was a really interesting situation. So.
Yeah, so, excuse me, so you said that the LPL rule set prevents, says that you have to remake pick and ban during a remake?
It's kind of vague. If you read it, it's
well, that's what I want in my rule set. It's just a lot of vague ambiguity.
Yeah, it's so vague because even at the very start it says, all of these examples are only included for... illustrative purposes, and actually, the referee can use his discretion to decide whether or not a remake is necessary. It's so really.
So wait, okay, so who do we? All right, so the controversy is
Travis
that
is who do I get mad at?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Get mad at IMA.
It's true. Okay, so why? Yeah. Wait, okay, but why? Yes. So why get mad at IMA? Do we think that this was not a actual hardware issue?
If you look at that clip. Has anyone ever right-click S, right-click S, right-click S? Because that is exactly what that looks like.
Yes.
That doesn't look like I'm spamming right-click and only some of them
I do that when I play Blitzcrank because I want to fake them out and think that.
Yeah, doesn't that look exactly like what happens when you're playing Blitzcrank? Yeah. That does not look like, a third of my mouse clicks are getting through and then it died. The
referees also said that they investigated the mouse. They found the mouse was broken. But again, you go back to the LPL scene. The teams with power, there's definitely this connotation that, the casters can't criticize them, right? They can kind of decide what they want to have going on, how they're going to dictate stuff. And then I may have a very close relationship with EDG, okay? So this is kind of the situation that we have going on here. It's really, really questionable. And I think that yeah, you go back to it, and it's maybe a little bit unfair to be critical because perhaps it's all just coincidences, right, for IMA. But at the same time, it's starting to get really suspicious, so you have to keep your eye on that team a little bit more going forward.
I also don't know how much I like the idea of like remake for hardware malfunction somewhat. It's like a little weird because for the most part in traditional sports, and I know you don't always want to parallel one-to-one, but for a lot of like equipment failures in traditional sports, it's kind of just like that's life versus like, oh my god, a bird flew into the ball.
Get a better hardware sponsor.
Yeah, like when Randy Johnson Randy Johnson killed a bird, they didn't like count that as a strike. I'm pretty sure. I think they're like, oh my god, what was that? So like, I think like if a bat breaks or your hockey stick breaks or your shoe falls off, no one's like timeout, doesn't count. Everyone stop. And I kind of feel a similar way about a mouse situation.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot more down. Like in esports, these games just keep rolling, right? Like in traditional sports, you have like these moments to sort of reset and recollect yourself.
Right, and like if they got a pause off in time, like yeah, sure,
you're okay with. But
yeah,
you
but
think
I wouldn't want to
should
remake a
play it
whole
out.
game. Yeah, because
well, so the nice thing is that theoretically you should be able to use this chrono break technology, and then you just go back a couple seconds before the death.
It hasn't been rolled out yet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want to bring up. Like, when are we going to have this in all regions? Because it's just so much better.
Well, you start with the best regions, and then you roll it out to the rest, right?
You start with the sloppiest region that's going to need a lot of remakes. Like, NA needs some help. Get them chrono break ASAP.
We don't know if this was a mistake or whether it was a bug.
Yeah, like, we don't know what we're seeing here. Just, they need that option. NA
they
needs
to
that
die
help.
that tower? I mean, that looks really bad.
All of our mouse is broken. We right-clicked under the turret. I don't know. Yeah.
That was my thing. Like, we really, for this to stop happening and just to remove all suspicion, we really need to have that rolled out to all regions. So hopefully, I don't know when the ETA, didn't they say like right now it's just an NA? We don't know when the ETA is.
Yeah, they didn't even announce that it was a thing until they showed it
until
up,
they had to use it in
really
that FlyQuest
frustrating, by
C9
the way.
game.
This just goes like, if I could just 30-second rant about this is just like Riot Games in a nutshell. Like, we just happen to have this chrono break technology. Sorry, we didn't tell you about anything. Now we're doing this. Like, there's so many things that you people could just talk about and just say and do and like give us a timeline for when you're gonna release it. Oh, you don't know when? Is there a technology issue? What? Just any kind of information would be great, Riot.
Especially since this is the second remake controversy in LPL to split, and then we had the Vitality, Vitality issue where it's like people are still saying that effectively Giants were relegated because of the remake with the Vitality Giants game. Yeah. Or no, Vitality. Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated, but like that game could have been the difference between Giants being relegated or not.
Yeah, I mean, I just like. I get that it takes a lot of time and that there's engineering resources and that there's probably politics between the people that build the game and also the esports, because it's not like they're all on the same team within the company, and big companies have politics. But like this, the amount of times there are controversies around remakes, like it's just, you can help yourself out so much by just like figuring this stuff out. So.
Yeah, it's the same thing that every like major tech company faces, where it's like, mention feature, fans love the idea of feature gets delayed, now fans are mad, and it's kind of like, what if we just don't tell them it's there until we need it, and then they can't get mad?
Yeah,
I kind of understand that perspective, but
I guess so. But then I think, not to go too off topic, but whenever they started talking about sandbox mode and saying like this is coming, like transparency, in my opinion, is almost always good. You just need to figure out a good way to message it. And what happens frequently with these big companies is they are like, they go a little transparent, but they don't get like the messaging correctly or whatever, and it blows up in their face, and they're like, oh, now we're never going to say anything ever again to anyone about anything at all, and it's just like, guys, come on, let's just figure this out. All right, so anything else about the IMA remake controversy? It does seem like an interesting situation, and I don't really know.
Glad OMG won.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
that was a big moment for me.
I mean, if you're an OMG fan, if you follow that team, it was like such a crazy series, because it was like the casters were all, I just feel like Icon and World 6, like they don't have the experience to make this comeback. You can see them falling apart, and Road was like literally spam laughing and dancing on corpses in the first 2 games. Like after, it's like, that doesn't seem suspicious at all or weird. And then in the 3rd game, they had the turnaround. Icon was playing Ari, which is like an iconic OMG champion from when Cool was part of the organization. And then in the 5th game, like they literally all played the champions that were known, Going, Loveling, and Cool, and San were known for it. It was like this really weird situation, but it's a great series if you turn off your brain, because the games themselves are really bad.
Yeah, that was what I thought. Anyway, let's.
It's your kind of series. Right,
Exactly.
Let's go to a topic Travis is much more well versed on.
As much as I would like to,
Okay.
we do actually have to go to break. We're running a little late, so we'll be back right after these messages.
Top 5 heroes.
That's it. I quit.
I'm so sorry. There's no way you get that.
My parents got divorced when I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old, and after that was when all the problems started happening. After the divorce, we were really low on money. It was very hard for us, and we ended up having to move around to a new house because we couldn't afford the house that we were living in. My mom was really stressed because she was raising me and my brother by herself for the most part, and because of that, I just started playing video games and started doing what made me happy, even though it wasn't a good thing for me to be doing. I didn't really know what I was doing with my life because I didn't have good grades. Pretty much the only thing I was like semi-decent at was League, and I was like, I think if I don't give this my all now, I don't think I'll be happy with my life.
We are back, and boy, do we have an amazing topic. Now, a lot of people, they've been talking about these finals and world championships, and they've been talking about musical performances. Some of them have them. People, we remember the iconic Imagine Dragons ones. Controversy about, if the Z one was particularly good. This year's NA LCS finals, they decided to, for the first time, bring out a musical act, and we have him on the show right now. His name is Mark Zimmerman in the Yahoo Esports studio. Now, Mark, actually, let's just take a look at your most recent performance. So we can pull the clip right now.
Know this song, it is tradition. I want everyone to get hyped, get involved, and sing along with me. Bee woo woo, boo dee doo, boo doo doo, boo dee woo, boo dee woo, boo doo doo, bee woo woo, boo.
Incredible, where did the inspiration for that come from, Mark?
Well, so it was a thing I did in the quarterfinals, and then it was super last minute. That was like not a planned thing at all.
I mean, that was obvious.
Yeah. I mean, if it was planned, that'd be even better. But it was just like I did in the quarterfinals. Like as we were tossing the break one time, I kind of just made that noise and kind of was on Reddit. And then Game 5 happens on Saturday, and apparently a bunch of people in the control room, because I was not there for Riot. I was there doing interviews with other people. And so like apparently everyone in the control room was joking like, oh, where's Mark? Get Mark out there. And then the next morning, just randomly, I bumped into the guy like in charge of all the production stuff, Dave, and he was like, "Well, if we get Game 5 today, maybe." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm up for it." And like Games 1 and 2 happened, we don't think it's gonna work. And then Game 3 and 4 happened. I guess like it's like, okay, we're doing it. And there was zero prep, zero rehearsal, zero like any idea what we're doing. My IFB was too low. I couldn't hear the music, so I didn't know I was out of sync at all. I had like no idea what was going on. And I think that kind of made it better.
Yeah.
That just was not in tune at all.
I could tell Emily was really into the story, by the way. I looked over and she's on Slack, like talking to our colleagues. And
anyways, to wrap up to what we're talking about with this topic is that I kind of agree with what some of the community said, where it's like, is this really the right time to do it? It's like a really hype finals. There's a lot of, storylines going on about the game and the teams and all this stuff. And then out of nowhere, you have like this troll, stupid thing.
Yeah,
that,
but here is the thing. They weren't doing anything with that hype. Like, this is a little bit of my frustration, I feel like, with this is commonly an issue with spring finals, where I feel like they don't put very much production into it, or a lot of money. But I get it, because like summer and Worlds, and that's where everything starts to pick up. But things like the analyst desk, to me, have fallen off. Like, there's less fun involved in it. Like, you just kind of hop in, talk about the game, hop out, etc. For me, I feel like this is kind of like the pictures that I saw of the EU LCS final, where you had the guys come out and like the masks and the unicorn and love guys out there and all that stuff. Like, it's fun to feel like there's a sense of culture. And my worry is that, and we get this criticism from a lot of other esports, that League is trying to go like way too mainstream sportsy, where it's just kind of like boring analysis followed by professional commentary. It's just, everything is so serious. And this is why I was a big fan of what you did.
I mean, I think there can be both, and it really just depends on timing. Because like as someone who's been watching OGN for years, and like I don't know how many of the finals you guys have watched from Korea by Travis's blank look. I'm guessing he's watched none of them.
Yeah, there's Faker was in a chair, a throne.
Yes.
Those are the hype points, but then there's Cloud Temple.
But like, so yeah. What I wanted to say is, even in like a 3-0 sweep, they do these weird features with the teams that are not serious, and usually kind of riffing on something that is a commonly known thing, or like making fun of one player, like for example Deft, because he was known for having this really poor mentality sometimes, and he would die a lot in lane and then he'd get really sad. They did this whole feature about how like the team comes around because he's so sad and he's moping and stuff, where like they had KTA and Samsung Blue rap to like hype up their match, and it was really bad. The Rocks Tigers did a cover of Big Bang's Lies during one of their finals, which is actually hilarious because Peanut is so bad they had to auto-tune him. He's so bad at singing, and it's still like a very bad auto-tune, and it is so funny. And even in the middle, like some of these come in the middle of like 3-0s, like not close finals, and they're still like very fun. Sometimes the trash talk segments just have this really great like spirit to them, where you have certain players like making fun of each other, and then in this most recent finals, Score and Blank try to make fun of each other, and it's like, you used to be really bad at jungling, you too. Like, it is just the lamest thing ever, but it's still really funny. I just think it always comes down to timing for me, and like I don't feel like it's wasting the hype or anything like that. I guess I love when OGN plays those features in between matches.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't like traditional sports. I think it's pretty boring. I just can't keep up with it. The reason I got into esports was because of, I think, so many other people, like streamer culture and the personalities and how open everybody can be, and how to a certain extent, like, esports doesn't take itself too seriously. Like, we have a pigeon that we're shooting a video shot of as we're like panning dramatically to the picks and pans. Like, that stuff is, I think, really important, and we will lose ourselves a little bit as we're talking about like all these big investors coming in and all this stuff. Like, I want to make sure that we stay authentic to the community and the fan base, and if that means Mark has to go out on stage and do something that everybody who doesn't watch LCS will be like, what the hell is that? Like, that's great.
That's kind of the thing, is it's like you had to know the joke a little bit, and there's a big difference between like quarterfinals, random match, and then like, you know, the actual finals.
Yeah, but also, how much harm does it do? Like,
it doesn't do much harm.
Happen,
it was like a 30-second plug.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so for me, like, if that had become like a whole segment or something like that, like, oh, we've got Mark like in the studio, he's getting, like, maybe you can overplay it, right? But like, I think that was kind of the perfect thing, and there's a decent amount of downtime between game 4 and game 5, and you kind of want to liven everything up. So I don't know, I'm a big fan. Kelsey, I don't know if you feel free to not say anything if you have no opinion on the topic, as we are kind of low on time, but if you have any thoughts.
Obviously, I like the ramp up of analysis in addition to some of the other stuff. I just wanted to say that throughout Emily's entire spiel, all I was thinking was, why couldn't we have auto-tuned MarkZ? You know?
Oh, yeah. That's what they should have done. They should have, like, auto-tuned you like they did for Peanut.
I would have been down. We just had zero time. It was literally like in the morning getting coffee, just like, wouldn't that be funny if we did this? And it's like, oh, we're doing that.
Also, did you go out of your way to sing it that out of tune? I feel like you did.
Yeah. I mean, like, I can't sing at all. And that's me intentionally being even
also
worse
no
than
lyrics,
I normally am.
So it's usually
well, you could like try
noises.
and match pitch and stuff like that. Like I was out of sync this time. Yeah.
All right, Kelsey. The Flash Wolves region. This is your kind of meme that you're trying to start. I know this is your big thing. But the bigger question: are Flash Wolves as good as everyone says? Because they are kind of hyped up. What say you?
And part of the reason why I call it the Flash Wolves region is relevant to the topic, which is that they are actually just destroying everyone in LMS for the most part. I think they've lost 2 games the entire season, and one of them was this weekend. And I think that in the loss, it was a little illuminating as to like maybe how they can lose some games. If you remember some of their flaws back from IEM as well, which is just like they do the tunnel vision on the 5v5 mid after a certain point. But and then in this clip, the reason why I wanted to sort of play it is I feel like AHQ have an opportunity to play a lane swap, right? And then when they don't and they instead play to top side, you end up in a position where like the Flash Wolves can answer bottom much better. And so this is like AHQ not taking the play that made more sense, and then like Flash Wolves capitalizing off of that and having a really strong early. And so like these types of situations I think are relevant to talk about a little bit. And just because I think everyone is kind of after IEM feeling like it goes without saying, you know, Flash Wolves are the best non-Korean team in the world. So that's the question that I'm sort of positing. And I know that Travis watches LMS even more than he watches LPL.
Yeah, so Flash Wolves, I think it's been really interesting to see their progression over the past, since the start of this year. I mean, obviously they have a history of attending these international events and really showing up, but I think it's been fascinating to see them in a region that, you know, I think overall a lot of people don't feel like is necessarily completely competitive, really show just a very strong dominance. Yes, what's up, Emily? Yeah.
Okay, so
you don't need to raise your hand.
You can say, "Shut up, Travis," and then
I don't like interrupting.
I'll interrupt next time. You can just like wave me down.
I think the things to look at for Flash Wolves are that so they've improved from previous appearances, mainly because they don't have NL anymore. And saying that NL was dead weight is apparently being very nice to him, because people are like, wow, that's all you're going to say about him when I brought it up on Twitter. But basically, they have Betty now, who is a lot more competent. That being said, I think the Flash Wolves' general weaknesses, when you think of them at international competitions previously, when they'd fumble, would definitely be in the mid game, and then you just see these like 60, 70-minute games where they have no idea what to do, but they still have a lead, and then the other team somehow wins, like, because it gets to 70 minutes and nothing matters. I don't think you'll see a repeat of, say, Pain Gaming versus Flash Wolves in Season 5, which was, those games are really bad. Really, really bad. And then some of their games from this past group stage at Worlds were equally... Actually, no. They were slightly better, but still not enjoyable to watch. So I think you won't have that anymore. Like, I don't think you'll see that as much, because I think they've improved their mid-game enough that you won't see those games. But that being said, they still make a lot of mistakes, and I definitely think they're within reason for other teams to capitalize on them.
I think it's, you know, without having watched a ton of their games, I think it's a weird one, because whenever you take an early game dominant team in their own region and put them, especially at the start of the tournament, up against weaker teams, probably not weaker regions, because from what I hear from LMS, it's basically Flash Wolves and then AHQ, and then even for like the past seasons, no one else has been really close to them. But it's the kind of thing where, like, given that they're playing in the play-in stage of the group or of MSI, they're probably going to smash a couple of teams before they get to the main event, and then they have to play whoever they end up going up against. So it could be a kind of thing where people in the first like week or two being like, these guys are going to be so good, they're going to give this team a run for their money, and then it becomes a lot more difficult when they can't abuse people who just like give things up on the other side of the map in like that clip.
You kind of answered this question, I think, with that answer, but if you want to expand on it at all, or if anybody else wants to take it, Vashnaroth says, question for the desk at Yahoo Esports, and especially for Emily, is Flash Wolves' early games strength may be exaggerated by the low level of their domestic competition, or could it translate well versus stronger teams as well?
So I think it's definitely exaggerated. I actually, like yesterday I was going through Flash Wolves games, and I still have to finish watching all their games. I asked a friend of mine, he's ex-Gumihu on Twitter, Xander, but he follows LMS regularly, watches all of the games, even the awful ones. And he basically gave me a list of VODs to watch that I need to catch up on, which has been promised to show off their best and all of their XDs. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think the thing with Flash Wolves is the fact that their early game is so good. It's something ridiculous. Like they have a lead of 2,031 gold at 15 minutes on average. If you average like, and this is a weighted average, but between their regular season and playoff games in total, which is definitely elevated by the region itself, because some of the teams they're playing, they're not even like close to what the Flash Wolves can do, and they just have no answer for what the Flash Wolves can do early. I think a couple things that are really interesting about the Flash Wolves is that they do match up well against SKT. I mean, for me personally, I'm still picking SKT to win the event, but I think that's definitely something interesting that always throws a wrench into whenever we look at Flash Wolves at international competitions. They just so happen to match up very well against this one team that is the best team in the world. But I do think it's very inflated, like the numbers specifically. So like if you're looking at statistically, those numbers are absolutely ridiculous. Like arguably one of the best early game teams in the world is KT Rolster. Like even though I don't think KT are a quote unquote good team, I think they are good early, and their gold lead was something like 1,000 something if I remember when I was comparing it. Like the Flash Wolves is just ridiculous. Like in the playoffs, it's almost 2,500 gold lead on average.
I think the thing to talk about Flash Wolves is two things about the Flash Wolves early game. One is that I actually think to an extent some of the things that made their early game really good is hurt a little bit by Betty showing up. And that in particular isn't that like NL was good in lane or anything. It's just that it forced Flash Wolves to come up with like really creative early game starts. Like they really focused on taking Scuttle like way before a lot of teams did. They had this really interesting lane swap that they could get AHQ to opt into, where they pushed like all the way to inhib, and then they
Kelsey,
like,
you're kind of breaking up, so I think we're gonna have you call back in just a second, and maybe we'll just go without video so that we can somehow the connection between China and America is struggling.
No way.
Okay.
So I guess the question is, are they as good as everyone says? Because everyone's saying, from what I hear, is that they're probably the best team outside of Korea. And so I guess that's the real question, right? Not like, are they going to do decent at the tournament, but will they like be in the finals versus SKT is what some people are predicting. So I don't know what you think, Emily.
I'm not sure, to be honest, because I need to go back and watch VODs of other teams as well. And like Kelsey's back, so I don't know if she wants to continue her point, but like I want to see them match up against other teams that are, I don't know. Like I'm honestly like never sure. Like I don't ever want to pick like this team is definitively the best outside of Korea. So
Emily, the correct answer is, how are they going to be in the finals versus SKT when TSM is going to be in the finals versus SKT? You can only have two teams.
Right, you are, Travis.
That is your
Kelsey,
question.
Kelsey, are you how's things sounding from China?
Yeah.
There we go.
We're good. The point I wanted to make is that I think that not having NL doesn't force them as much to come up with creative solutions to how to get ahead early game, which is why I thought that Flash Wolves early game was just like so strong before. They were really good at isolating Scuttle before a few other teams. They had this really creative like early lane swap where they pushed all the way to inhib and then pulled like super minions to intercept minion waves so that Maple could get ahead in the mid lane, things like this. The thing that they're still really good at early, which people say, well, how can you say Flash Wolves is a good early game team or outplayed G2 early game at IEM? It's like, well, they are really good at identifying, you know, what they have to control against the other team, even if the other team has a better early game composition, so that they get to the mid and late game really well. So they're really good at identifying what they need to do in general in the early game, regardless of what their comp is. So, like, if they have two really strong lanes, like Renekton and LeBlanc, well, LeBlanc needs to be controlled a lot more than Renekton because of, like, the damage that LeBlanc can do later and things like this. So I think it's really interesting thing for the Flash Wolves, and I will say that their early game is just good in general, and maybe their ability to snowball is exaggerated, but their early game principles are really strong.
Yeah. Well, hey, Twitch chat obviously doesn't care about this because they're still arguing about whether or not you should have been allowed to sing on stage. they're just stuck in that. Very good. I mean, I guess time will tell with Flash Wolves. I as we were kind of talking about, I do think it's kind of hard to say how good they are until time and time again we've seen, especially in Europe, I think teams that just dominate, you know, their region, then they show up at international events and just bust her out. So we'll see what happens with Flash Wolves. Moving on, how fair is the timeline for international events? I think this sort of spawned off of a Parth situation or Parth comment this past weekend. Emily, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so first we're going to roll a clip that's from the TSM press conference after the NA finals, and then I'll talk about it.
I think it's a really strange decision to have MSI be this long because we're going to be right after finals in 2 or 3 days. We're leaving and going to MSI. And assuming we're there for the entire time, I think that ends on May 21st. And then 2 weeks after that is when summer starts. So I think at least in the future, something can be remedied where either they shorten MSI or they live maybe like a longer period of time between the next season start, or they have like a bye week for the team that went to MSI. I think, like CLG said last year, they were really disadvantaged by going there because they didn't have any time to rest, and summer is such a long process from season to playoffs to Worlds. I think we've already sort of determined that after MSI, we're going to take a week and a half off. And even if we are somewhat rusty coming into summer, hopefully that won't hinder us too much. And we're just going to sort of take it slowly coming into the beginning of summer and hopefully build a momentum towards the end.
And sorry, by the way, for the quality of that video, we had to shoot it on iPhone, and Riot didn't really have a PA system set up there for the press conference. So it's just a little sloppy. But Emily, continue on.
Okay, so I guess this is something that's always brought up when teams duck out of events like IEM, for example, where like everyone kind of slaughters teams for being like, why didn't you go, or blah blah blah, and it's usually the reason is just because travel is like very exhausting and you miss out on a lot of practice or preparation for what's ever going on in your home region. So I guess I wanted to just address like how do you guys feel about the time that teams take to get to MSI? Because like if you remember the first MSI, there was a matter of 48 hours, I think, tops for the Brazilian finalists to get to the wildcard qualifier. And then at the MSI event itself, I believe that both EDG and SKT were coming like immediately after their finals, like within days. And they didn't like complain about the jet lag, but I know like there was this big joke where SKT were following Bengi around because he was the one that had the most international experience. So they like slept when Bengi slept and they ate when Bengi ate to like get around the fact that like the jet lag was actually pretty hard to deal with at first. Because of the immediacy of the event starting. And now you have the play-in kind of, so wildcard is rolled into the event, which I actually do appreciate and I like a lot. But the event itself is super long. It does hinder teams who are returning back to their home regions. And I guess I just wanted to bring this up as a discussion of like, international events and versus teams preparing for their domestic events.
Yeah, I mean, not to recap what you just said, but it's crazy to me when I realized that TSM wins in Vancouver, has like a couple days to pack, and then like go to Brazil for Play-In, and then if like we joke about them making finals, but let's say crazy world where they make it all the way to the finals, so they're playing for another 3 weeks. Then they come back and they've got, I think, 2 weeks to prepare for a new patch that everybody else has been sort of figuring out. And the thing, Emily, that concerns me about this stuff isn't the amount of time they have to prepare. It's the fact that they have no time off to kind of reset and relax or whatever. So think about a world where TSM is actually does go to the finals. So these guys start at the beginning of the split. They go through all the way through playoffs. Then they go immediately to Brazil, play all the way through MSI, go to finals. Then they have 2 weeks to like come back, and I guess they're going to take a week off, it sounds like. But they have to prepare for this patch, hopefully get good enough so that they can play through the entire split. Then go to the playoffs. Hopefully for them, they win again. If that happens, they have a couple weeks to get ready to go to China, which, by the way, is a complicated, crazy experience, and they'll probably want a boot camp or something like that. It's hard. You don't want to end up in a G2 vacation situation, so then you're still playing and scrimming and getting ready for this thing. And oftentimes there's some surprising changes before finals that you have to, or for World Championships you have to get ready for.
Triforce do 400% damage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So suddenly you have to learn how to play Corki again for the next year. And so, like, it is just insane to me, the schedule that we're on right now with the split. So it was interesting to hear Parth say that. I think it's a disaster. Like,
it's
really
been going on for years. Like, it's not, this isn't just specific to MSI, and it sucks because I really want more international competitions. Like, I would love to have fewer domestic leagues and just international competitions, to be honest. And I know a ton of people disagree with me on that.
There's supposed to be one in July too. Some new event of some kind.
That's the rumor, yeah.
But the point is, like, people have been saying since season 3.
Okay? The Chinese have confirmed it.
Yeah, but that's for Asia. We don't know about the West.
Yeah, but still. Anyway. Okay, I'm sorry that like you don't care about.
No, I'm just saying.
No, Chinese players don't get tired. They don't get tired, even though they haven't finished their playoffs yet. But TSM, let me tell you about them.
Clarifying for
Chinese
people.
are fine.
Difficult schedule.
Clarifying for people that are watching.
But this is something that people have always talked about with the League of Legends schedule since the establishment of LCS is brutal. Like, I think it was I forget whether he said it was said when he was still on Fnatic or whether this was when he was on Origin, but just like you don't get any time to rest. You're basically punished for winning because you just have to keep playing and playing and playing. And obviously, like, you still want to win. Like, I'm not saying these players are like, I'd rather rest than like represent my region, because that's not it too either. But like, there's no downtime and the schedule is just awful.
The sad thing about this is that, and I don't want, like, we're starting to veer into just a broader conversation about player situation, but I think so often we get really bummed whenever these top tier players like disappear, or in some cases like just stop caring and kind of end up on a lower team where they don't try as hard. And it's a great deal of that, I think, is just because it's just so exhausting. I mean, I don't want to speak for the guy, but I bet you if the player schedule wasn't as bad, like, Meteos would probably be more interested in playing competitively. So, and he's such a huge name that he was getting his name shouted out by the crowd in Vancouver. So it's just kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I think in terms of how fair it is from a competitive standpoint, it's not horrible. It could be better. I think you can easily
get around that. I don't understand why they just don't give teams bye weeks and have them play. Like, I guess that would mess with the schedule so much, but like, they've done that in Korea where like teams coming in from IM or whatever, like, they won't play that week because
TSM doesn't play week 1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I feel like you can easily get around that by just scheduling it differently.
Yeah, I'm sure there's concerns about, like, well, now you're pushing it back further, or they have to have like something else. But I think the biggest problem I see is like with the Chinese region still having to play their playoffs as like MSI is starting. I think that's the biggest example in terms of like player burnout. It is really rough, but like having a week turnaround to like fly to Brazil for TSM isn't like.
I feel kind of. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the LPL sort of did it to themselves because they always have 2 weeks off for Lunar New Year, but then this split, in addition to having 2 weeks off, they took a week off for IEM, and then EDG didn't even go. But historically, they never take a week off for IEM. They just have like the bye week, like Emily was saying, for a team and things like this. So they would theoretically be in the same position as the other regions if they had just stuck to like the normal schedule that they do. So.
Right. I think if everyone just ended this week, which everyone but LPL did, and then everyone knew who was going to MSI and stuff, it'd be relatively fair in terms of competitive integrity, but not necessarily in terms of how the players feel.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on as we're getting closer and closer to the end of the show. Once again, we are going to have a situation where a member of our team tries to convince the rest of us to care about something. Emily.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Are you excited about the MSI Play In?
Well, I am. NA is in it, so wherever
they're in
North
the second
America
round,
is.
though.
I mean,
did you know it starts this week?
Oh, it starts this week. Yeah, I mean, I just referenced that with
someone
the thing,
you know quite well will be on the analyst desk for it.
Emily, you're going to be on the analyst desk for this?
Yes.
Heck no, they're not good. They'd never put me on the analyst
no.
desk.
Heck no.
Well,
Yeah, well, that's why you're so vulgar.
I went
You're
through,
out of control. How could you ever be on Riot Broadcast with that language?
Yeah.
I went through. I stopped myself.
Yeah.
It was good.
Okay, that was a close one. All right, so
Travis, here's why you should care.
Explain what the play-in is first, because a lot of people probably don't know.
So this year's MSI is a bit different because they basically have the wildcard event rolled into MSI itself. So they've been separated into 2 groups, which were seeded and then drawn this past week. It is Direwolves from Oceania, Rampage from Japan, Red Canids from Brazil, and Supermassive Esports from Turkey. Those are all in Group A. And then Group B is Isurus Gaming from Latin America South, Lion Gaming from Latin America North, Marines Esports from Southeast Asia, which is the GPL. It used to be rolled in with LMS before they split. Travis is already nodding off over there. And Virtus Pro from Russia, or Commonwealth of Independent States. The reason why you should care, Travis, is because one of them plays TSM.
Oh, okay.
From Group A.
All right.
So
sorry,
one of these 4 teams will be facing TSM in their round of the play-in, and then the other team will face Flash Wolves. So the competition starts this week.
So why don't I just wait till they face TSM?
Because you might want to know a little bit about that team.
Why would you not want to know about
Well, okay,
team?
by your argument, I could have started watching them whenever they were playing in their region.
Right, but you don't know who's going to actually be the one to advance out. Now you know.
No, but I still don't know
who's true. That you could
which is going
not
to be the one
know.
to advance out.
Yeah, but
I mean, you can get a good overview of like the style of the team, how they play. Like, I mean, I would be watching this if I was TSM, because I wouldn't want to be that team that lost a best of 5.
No, of course, but I'm not TSM, right? Like, I'm sure TSM will look at this and figure it out, but like, I mean, for the sake of the conversation on the show.
Well, so for people who might be more like you, it will have like the full Riot production behind it. This is like going to be shot in North America in terms of where it's being broadcast out of.
Yeah,
so
but you don't actually see, like, do they do shots of the players and all that stuff? I mean, it's in the Brazil studio, right, in Sao Paulo.
The Brazil studio is like really nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have a full like LCS setup.
Yeah.
It's obviously for the Brazilian fans as well to watch this. So like this is a live event. The NA broadcast part is still being shot out in North America before a bunch of the guys fly down there, so they're not there for 3 weeks. But like, you know, you're getting Dash and I on the desk for a lot of it, so that's probably a huge draw for a lot of people.
Are you gonna do the Silver Sun or Silver
No,
Scripts
shut up.
things? Okay.
Also, it's not best of 5s.
Yeah.
No.
It's not. It's best of 1s. It's your favorite.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's your
I do
favorite
like
It's
season.
like it's like really chaotic. You get
But
to
the
see like
problem
a lot
is
of
like,
outplays.
Okay,
This-
so
like-
the problem is I don't have a reason to care about these teams, right? The best of 1s are fun whenever something crazy happens. Do I really care about if Virtus Pro is going to upset a team from Singapore?
Well, it depends. I mean, how much
Is it an upset?
like, do
I mean, I
Do
don't know.
you even know?
I don't know.
I mean, for you, because your job is to tell stories and narratives and stuff like that, having this team's journey from beginning to end could be pretty
And
relevant if they go and they beat Flash Wolves or
I am
NA.
taking the stance of a
Contrarian
North American
stance.
fan,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like, obviously
You're
for me, yes,
taking
it
the
is.
stance.
Well, I mean, obviously for me, yes, there are professional reasons to follow it and to care about these teams and to
Right,
because later on I might be interviewing them, though TSM's going to crush them. So, But
Of course.
yeah. I make these jokes, by the way. I fully would not be surprised to see TSM bust her out of the play-in stage. Like, it would be such a North American thing to happen, right? Like, I would not.
I feel like North America usually doesn't flop like so hard that you're just like, why do we even show up?
No, I guess that's G2's.
I think Europe has like the higher highs and lower lows.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, Europe, you are so disappointed.
Yeah, like what is it, like the semis into
yeah, they have
semis
into like
TSM had that one MSI where it was really
so TSM
rough.
had that one, yeah. But for the most part, at least like someone gets out of groups from North America, and we're like, all right.
We're by the way, Kelsey's back, but she's audio only, so you'll get to get great shots of us as we're just listening on her, and we'll see if the audio is good. Kelsey, what were you gonna say?
Just trying to say that I'm not that she doesn't.
Nope. It was a good try. It was a good try.
Good
Sorry,
hustle.
Kelsey.
China.
They're
Anyway,
already starting to sabotage.
So I guess the question that people will probably be asking is it capable for these teams to beat TSM in a best of 5 theoretically? Like, I feel like whenever someone talks to me about wildcard regions, it's always like, how will they do against my region? Like, for example, when someone asked me if Kaboom could beat Alliance in 2014 after I wrote about them, like, I gave them I think 5 or 10% chance
and then they did it
in my evaluation, and that was the highest percentage, and it was just matchup.
And Albus Nox was one of my favorite stories from last year's Worlds, for sure.
Yeah, and now, I mean, I'm really interested because previously these wildcard teams have had to prep for. They've often had to prep for 7 opponents in best of 1s, which is really difficult. Like when I've talked to players, they're like, yeah, you can just be cheesed in 1 game and then like you don't face that team again. You're kind of screwed. And that counts against you. So I think this format is a lot better, and hopefully you will be able to see a little bit more of these teams' overall play style and how they approach the game. As for whether any of the teams in Group A could beat TSM, just because I think that's what most people are asking. I do think for all of the flaws that we talked about with Flash Wolves, like we kind of touched upon them, I actually don't see any of these teams being able to beat Flash Wolves in a best of 5. But so that's going to be tough for Group B because they probably will kind of automatically, whoever makes it out of that group will drop. So the second stage of the play-in, the Group B winner faces Flash Wolves, the Group A winner faces TSM, and then the 2 losers play each other to determine all 3 spots. So the 2 from Flash Wolves, Group B winner, and TSM Group A winner, the 2 winners of those, they move on to the actual MSI event, and then the 2 losers play each other for the last spot. For Group A, I'm looking at Red and I'm looking at Supermassive in terms of teams that TSM would want to watch out for, because I do think if they play like at like their greatest capacity and TSM makes a lot of mistakes, I do think it's theoretically possible. I just think it's incredibly improbable. Because a lot of times you see some of these teams coming out and they don't have a lot of experience with having to, I guess, adjust across a best of 5, where I think TSM does have a little bit more experience just based on the players they have. I would watch out for Red and for Supermassive, though. I mean, Red is a team that's near and dear to my heart because I follow Brazil. And I just recently wrote an article on them. It was really good that you didn't read.
I save it to my Kindle.
You have to-do list.
Yeah. Do you release like an audio version of that? Like, is there
No.
like a? I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so if you could get that article,
you got text to speech, right?
It's a little too robotic for me.
Yeah,
that's like Kelsey reading it. You know,
Yeah.
with
the Skype problem.
broken Skype problem. Yeah. You know, for somebody who's just criticizing IMA for having technical issues, and
she's just like, I want to go to bed. Oops, Skype's
just
dropping.
like pulls the Ethernet cable in and out of her computer, like, oh, that's weird.
Starts torrenting. And you're like,
Yeah. All right.
Is she back?
I don't think she's back. I don't think she's ever coming back.
like not next week.
Oh.
Kelsey,
never again.
Kelsey, are you here?
Whoa.
Oh, she's muted now. We can't even get audio from her.
There we go.
All right.
It's VPN related.
Oh, there we go.
Apparently.
Okay, cool. Well, now you sound fine. So, just in time for questions from chat. We don't have very much time today, but we can take a couple, and so we'll give a second to let that stuff catch up. In the meantime, Mark, have you decided to make a better apparel decision in the future?
I think I'm gonna make some worse ones in the future. Actually, I'm underneath this. I'm wearing your favorite, just overly baggy white V-neck.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll cover it with a sweater so he doesn't get mad, and then he's just still not happy.
I mean, you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to wear something stupid and then cover it with something else that's stupid. And
I don't consider this stupid. This is considered like comfortable. Not all of us want to look like bitter old sea captains all the time.
All right. I don't think that's an accurate description. Okay. All right. Breast Support NA says, which is the better ADC, Cutie Pie or Double Lift? Mark, as the North American expert.
I think Double Lift for sure.
Okay.
I don't know, like, what are Cutie's career highlights way back in like IPL 4, running that like triple support with a Mundo comp, and then like he's on Kog'Maw, or maybe when he like suicided trying to get the Krugs that one time when they were still golems.
Yeah.
Hey, Yellow Star said that effectively that Cutie Pie had a very large impression on him in terms of like, you know, ADCs. He just couldn't be that good, right? So like, you could argue that Cutie Pie is the reason that we had Yellow Star support, which arguably had a much larger impact on the international stage than Double Lift ever did. So.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay. I'm not. We're moving on to the next
I
question.
might not agree with that.
Vashnaroth asks, predictions for the LPL split winner. Kelsey, go.
I already talked about how I think that
You have to make a prediction.
it's really hard to predict because
prediction. You have to make
WE
it.
Gun to your head.
stylistically match up well to RNG because of the way they play the jungle. But WE just do these things where they draft incorrectly for their strengths. They just like fumble randomly in dives and things like this, and their mid-game transitions maybe aren't as good. So I think if you go consistency, you have to go RNG. But consistency is a very difficult word to use in LPL anyway. But I'll say RNG.
All right. Let's see. MAI0, MAI0. I'm spelling it out for the lower third man in the back. MAI0 says, will there be a clash of any region styles at MSI? I'm going to throw this over to Emily.
Yeah. I mean, so like any region style or.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're talking about how oftentimes you see like different metas develop. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit at lunch with like Kog'Maw, right?
I mean, I think, yeah. Oh, yeah. The LPL first pick Kog'Maw.
Yeah.
I think that more so than regional styles. Okay, so this is like. You probably asked me the wrong question because this touches upon.
I can give it to somebody else if you want.
This touches upon a pet peeve of mine where people say regional style and don't consider like team style instead.
I mean, China's very aggressive,
and I would rather that people look at the teams themselves than the specific regions. But I do think we have a lot of interesting like teams coming in stylistically, like we already mentioned with Flash Wolves. SKT, G2. So
I'm not sure I agree with like style. Like we play fast, they play slow, like that kind of stuff. But I think especially in playoffs, because by the time you get to semifinals, what's often happening is there's only 4 teams still playing. So those teams all scrim each other, and you see like with that Kog'Maw priority going up in China. Same thing happened in North America with Ivern, where it's like suddenly Ivern's becoming pick ban when for most of the season, aside for like maybe at the beginning, NA didn't really care about Ivern.
It happened in Europe as well. I mean, Europe has traditionally cared more about Ivern in the split, but like that happened as well in the
right, where all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, when before none of these teams played a champion, now it's super priority for everyone because we saw it in the 3rd, 4th place match as well as in the finals match. So you might see some things like that where, oh, we prioritize this thing. But as soon as those teams start scrimming, they start intermingling. And for the most part, the metas get closer to stabilizing.
Yeah.
Or you see some interesting shifts. Like I know last MSI, we saw the support meta like shift towards mage supports, which was really interesting to watch throughout the tournament.
No one thought everyone was playing melee supports, and then CLG's like, no, we're going to play mages. And everyone's like, wait, this is annoying. and then they all play mages.
All right. Ryan, get ready with the keyboard because this question's from LOL_IZENTO, Izento, LOL_IZENTO. He asks, what's the most successful import besides Bjerg in North America? Which I think is a really good question.
All time or current?
Yeah, I know, because you're going to say Lyra. Right? It's just like...
I might say Arrow.
How much can Mark bring up Lyra on the show?
Yeah.
So
How do you define success?
I might say Arrow.
Yeah, I mean, okay, maybe let's just say all time because I think it is an interesting question.
That was just off the top of my head. I have to think a little bit more, but gut reactions Impact. So you're not doing Bjerg because he's an NA player, technically, everybody, before we all forget. But Impact joined, Tip, they did okay. Energy was a disaster. And then with C9, it's been pretty good. So he's played in a lot of Thor 4 place matches, almost won some finals.
So we think, so how about this? Huhi. Which
That's what I was just about to look up. I was like, is Huhi an import?
Because he made it to the second part of MSI, right? And he won a couple splits.
That's fair.
Yeah.
You could say him. You could probably throw Sven in there now as well. He's won 2 splits.
Yeah. That's pretty
as
big.
much as people don't often think of him as like being a super successful import. But
yeah.
He's been good.
Yeah.
He's been successful in being the only jungler to win NA twice or something. Only TSM jungler.
Yeah, because
usually TSM gets rid of the jungler.
Keep changing junglers, so that's fairly successful, right? So.
All right. Here's the last question from. Ready? Here we go, Ryan. Mock Knight 8, which is MOKNIGHT 8. He says, which NA team could have the biggest turnaround going into Summer Split? I really like this question.
I need a second to think about it. I want to say Echo Fox, but that team just always finds a way to struggle. And from what I've heard, it doesn't seem like any roster changes are happening. Like the whole team just went to Korea to boot camp, and like I just have no faith in that roster to get together and suddenly figure out how to play past early game, which they have struggled with for like 3 splits now in a row. So I'm very...
So Phoenix won, I don't really want to say because, I mean, they did well, but like could they make a finals would be an interesting question there. But I feel like they're still showing roster instability based off of this past weekend, right?
Yeah, I don't know about roster instability. They definitely have upside. Like Shady can definitely get better. Zig, I mean, he definitely came into his own this split, but like what's his ceiling? Has he hit it? That's another question you can ask.
Envy just let go Ninja.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up Envy because I think that Ninja was a really big problem on that team. Like putting it mildly, in terms of controlling the mid lane, and a lot of their drafting was kind of around what they like what he could play, I guess, is what it seemed like. So I want to see that team with a stronger mid laner that actually knows like, you know, how to push and how to ward and coordinate with Lyra, because I think that team could definitely surprise a lot of people. And I mean, the other reason is because within the span of this question, there's nowhere to go but up if you're Envy.
Well, that's why I didn't want to say Envy initially, was because I felt like it's like, well, the worst team in the league could get better.
Yeah, but I mean,
I think they could be a mid-tier, like make playoffs team if they get a good mid laner, or like not even a good mid laner, like a competent mid laner.
Which shouldn't be hard to do considering Ninja was taking up an import slot. So now you can literally take any mid laner that you can get in contact with and convince to join your team. Which, I mean, like, seems like Lyra's pretty good. Hey, and then maybe you get a import top.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, my guess is that they'll probably just go with a Korean mid because Seraph and Lyra are already on the team. But
sadly, no one said Dignitas.
Yeah, I don't know what their ceiling really is, because it seemed like they were bouncing back towards the end of the split, and then they just got demolished in playoffs. And it's just, you don't know where they go to improve, because Keen, we've seen enough of him to know like that's Keen. That's what you saw this split is what you're going to see next split of Keen. Like some good games, some awful games, generally making slightly head-scratching plays. Their bot lane is not going to like suddenly turn on and become a PowerPoint. And like the thing that really turned their season around was like the draft a little bit, because they no longer had the Korean coaches, and then Chaser started actually doing stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not like still a super high ceiling to me.
Emily, you know what time it is? It's the end of the show, everyone.
Best part of the show.
So it is time for Emily Rand's anime pick of the week, everyone. This is a segment that she She gets really excited about it every week. She plans out, and she's very enthusiastic about it. Pretty much the only reason she does the show. So, Emily, break down, what is your anime pick of the week?
So, my anime pick of the week is available to watch for free on Crunchyroll, I believe. And it's called Polar Bear Cafe, and it's really relaxing. It's about animals that hang out in a cafe. I know this sounds really dumb, but it's actually a hilarious show. And
so it's like a
I am a
comedy?
huge fan of it. Yes, it's very funny.
Yeah, I've never I don't watch anime myself, but there's like certain sort of online certain ones that just pop up a lot. I have not heard of Polar Bear Cafe.
I don't think many people have, which is why I wanted to bring it up.
Well, and we're changing that today. Polar Bear Cafe is on the map following this show. Fascinating. All right. Okay, so that's Polar Bear Cafe, available on Crunchyroll for free.
Whoa, what's with these plugs?
I know,
Are you getting paid?
I mean, that'd be nice, but no. Just
wow. Okay.
throwing it out there. But yeah, Emily's getting paid by Polar Bear Cafe.
No, I'm not.
They're we're really trying to grow our North American viewership.
It's a show that's 3 years old or something.
Oh wow! All right, yeah, I mean,
it doesn't have any sort of reach or marketing.
Cult following.
Yeah. How many episodes are there?
There are a lot, but you can just kind of jump right in.
Oh, it's very
It's not.
episodic.
Yeah, it's not like.
It's a shonen 300 in still.
Yes,
in the Polar Bear
I'm gonna
Cafe.
watch you make you watch 500 episodes.
Should I watch the MSI Play Ins this weekend, or should I watch Polar Bear Cafe?
Anytime, because you apparently find
MSI
the analyst
Play
desk
Ins.
boring.
Yeah.
Whenever that comes on, you can throw on some Polar Bear
Yeah,
Cafe.
you can just switch tabs.
Yeah. Anytime I see Mark. All right. Speaking of which, Mark, you want to say any shout outs or plugs or anything at the end of this?
Where's my camera? There's my camera. Thank you for having me on again, Travis. I will be doing the blame game for the finals this week, and then the rest of my time will be spent prepping for the MSI play-ins.
Who are you blaming?
I haven't read the Reddit threads yet, so I'm not 100% sure. It probably is a lot of comments just being like, wow, that was crazy. And then it's kind of hard to work with.
Can you do a blame
that.
game where you defend the media not picking Hanser for...
I mean, I might actually cover that one because it was one of the more outraged topics.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll probably come up. But otherwise, just prepping for MSI and then doing the play-ins, which start on Friday.
Yeah. And then Emily?
Hi.
Hi.
I guess I would. So if you're at all interested in the MSI plan, which maybe you're not, but I actually wrote an article, and I really I'm like, man, you should read this thing I wrote, but I really like it. And I wrote an article on Red Canids and their mid laner talkers, and yeah, go read it because I don't know. I think it came out really well.
Where can people follow you?
Oh, on Twitter at League of Emily.
There we go.
I forgot to do mine.
Your
at the MarkZ.
Kelsey, if you're working here, what you got? Kelsey Moser? No, we don't have her. Oh,
Hi.
hello. There we go. Bursting through.
Yes, I would just like to encourage people to watch LPL final. I think it should be pretty interesting. Hopefully I will have some stuff out on that, and also just general MSI excitement, a little bit of reflections on the finals, which I think had a lot of interesting points, so that'll be good.
Yep. Very good. Thank you so much. Finally, you can follow me at Travis Gafford on Twitter. I've got some content coming out from the LCS finals this week. Very funny. We did a thing with Peter or Double Lift where we hung out with him over the week, and he did some Twitter takeover. But we also have a video, kind of old school throwback to whenever I used to do interviews with him with fans. So that'll be going up on the site. Finally, also, and if we can take this from the computer, I've been getting more and more in photography, and there's a photo recently. This is actually just a model that I worked with in the Malibu Hills.
That's a good-looking guy.
You can almost see Catalina Island in the background. So
is there a full photo dump of those?
Well, we're still. There's a lot of editing that needs to be done to those to make the video.
Photoshop that thing out in the middle.
Yeah.
Add a lot more brushes. You know.
So you can enjoy that. For everyone else, I hope you enjoyed the show. Remember that next week, again, we normally air this on Mondays. It'll be Tuesday, 2 p.m. Pacific. Check out the podcast, YouTube, and also on our site. Thanks for watching.